Art of the future. It was Professor Armpit. Bonjour, he announced as he glided into the room. I was just in the ninth in boyhood, so I thought I stopped by to say bonjour. Bonjour, we all said. You're always welcome in my art room, Professor, said Miss Hannah. The children were really inspired by our visit to the museum. Would you like to take a look at the art our talented students are creating? Certainly. Uh-oh, Ryan whispered to me. You're in big trouble. You're in trouble, dude. Professor Armpit walked around the room, stopping at each desk to look at what each kid made. He went to Andrea's desk first, of course. He said as he looked at Andrea's dumb picture of flowers. Grown-ups always say, when they don't know what to say. Very interesting, Professor Armpit finally said to Andrea. Then he went to Emily's desk. Very interesting, he said. Then he went to Michael's desk. Very interesting, he said. Then he went to Neil's desk. Very interesting, he said. Professor Armpit said everybody's art was very interesting. Finally, he came over to me. He looked at my desk. No art, young man, he asked. I pointed at the wall next to me. Professor Armpit looked at my tube of paint taped to the wall. Then he walked back and forth so he could look at it from different angles. He stared at it for like 1,100 minutes. He said. You never know what means. Could be good or could be bad. What do you call this, young man? Professor Armpit finally asked. Call it? How should I know? I didn't even know that art had names. Everybody was looking at me. Nobody said anything. You could have heard a pin drop. That is, if anybody brought pins to school. But that would make no sense at all. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I had to think fast. I call it future art, I finally said. Said Professor Armpit. Future art? Yeah, I told him. It's not art yet, because the paint is still in the tube, but it could be art someday in the future. Professor Armpit stuck his face really close to the tube of paint I taped to the wall. He stared at it for a long time. Art of the future, he finally said, and he shouted, It's genius. Chapter 5, Art Low. I thought Professor Armpit had to be joking. I didn't make any art. All I did was tape a tube of paint to the wall, and he fell for it. What a scam. Yes, Professor Armpit shouted. This young man is a genius. I looked over at Andrea. She had on her mean face, and her arms were folded in front of her. Anytime somebody folds their arm in front of them, it means they're mad. Nobody knows why. I stuck my tongue out at Andrea. Well, yes, said Miss Hannah. All of our students at elementary school are creative. I work very hard every day to encourage them to. He's brilliant, interrupted Professor Armpit. This is a masterpiece that combines the element of postmodernist blah 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 with new wave expressionism blah 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 blah. He went on and on about my fake art. Professor Armpit was so excited I thought he was gonna faint. All I did was tape a tube to the wall, shouted Andrea. Boy, was she mad. It was the greatest moment of my life. This was the best next thing to watch an elephant fall on Andrea's head. What's the big deal? Alexia shouted. Any of us could have done that. but none of us you did. Professor Armpit, don't you see? The tube of paint is symbolic of the future, blah, 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 blah. And tape symbolically shake-lived. We have that prevent humanity from achieving our dreams and perfect future, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I added what he said. Do you like my flowers? asked Andrea. But Professor Armpit just ignored her. He could take her eyes off the paint tube I taped to the wall. I have not been this excited about new young artists since Keith Harding came on the scene. Professor Armpit, I had no idea who that guy was. You are going to be the next big thing, he continued. The next one grows. The next Rembrandt, the next Picasso. Who are they? Asked Neil. I think they used to play for the Lakers, I told them. Andrea was really mad. It's not fair, she said, stomping at her foot on the floor. Arlo isn't an artist. He never even heard of Picasso. Professor Armpit stuck her face near mine. Your name is Arlo? He said. Yeah, I admitted. That's the only person who calls me Arlo is Andrea, because she knows I don't like it. From now on, Professor Armpit said, the word you know you as Arlo. Artflow. Artflow? I asked. Yes, the great artists of the history were known by one name, Michelangelo, Leon Raphael. Professor Armpit couldn't stop raving about my dumb artwork. I've been waiting my entire life to discover the next genius, he said. And here I have discovered Artolo, in the last likely place. You can call me AJ. Very funny, Artolo. Professor Armpit. Said Professor Armpit. Sometimes we could spend our lives searching for something, and the whole time it was right under our nose. What was he talking about? Remember, under my nose is my mouth. Professor Armpit grabbed my hand. Arto, allow me to touch the hand that created this masterpiece. He said, let me touch the brain that could think such thoughtful. Hey, don't mess with my hair, dude, I told him. Professor Armpit is a nitwit. Chapter 6. The next Picasso. I thought that would be the end of it. We went back to class and did math, social studies, and reading with Miss Banks. Then it was time for dismissal, and I took the bus home. Everything was normal. It was almost dinner time. Then that's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. The doorbell rang. Well, that's not the weird part. Doorbells ring all the time. The weird part was what happened after that. I looked through the little peephole in the door, and do you know who was standing on our front steps? It was Professor Armpit. I opened the door. Artlo, what are you doing here? I asked him. I have come to introduce you to the art world, he said dramatically. I have homework. Homework can wait, Professor Armpit said. Sounded good to me. I hate doing homework. At that point, my parents came in from the kitchen. Did I hear the doorbell ring? My mother asked. I'm here to talk about your son?" said Professor Armpit. "What did he do now?" my mom asked. Has he been kicked out of school?" my dad asked. "No," Professor Armpit said with a laugh. "I'm Professor Pitt from the Museum of Recent Art. Your son has created the most groundbreaking sculpture I've ever seen in years. He's an artistic genius." "Are you sure you have the right address?" asked my dad. "Blah, blah, blah, blah. The next big thing," said Professor Armpit. "Blah, blah, blah, blah. Prodigally. Blah, 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 blah. Once in a lifetime. Blah, 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 blah." Somehow, Professor Armpit convinced my parents that I was the next Picasso. He said he wanted to take a party in the honor of at an art gallery. We were about to sit down for dinner. My dad said, "AJ is an artist," my mom said, getting her coat. I gotta see. Dinner can wait. Let's go." We drove 1,100,000 miles until we got to the art gallery. I said I was hungry, and Professor Armpit told me the gallery would have something called hors d'oeuvres, whatever they were. As soon as we walked inside, I could see the gallery was filled with a bunch of art nerds like Professor Armpit wearing caps and beards. Everybody burst into applause when I came into the room. My dumb paint tube was taped to the white wall, and do you know what was on the table? A bowl of pretzels. I made a beeline for the pretzels and stuffed my face. "Attention, art lovers," announced Professor Armpit. Everybody got quiet. "I'd like to introduce you to Arto, the young genius I told you about." "Well, if the essential," Professor Pitt said, "the boy is genius," some guy said. "It must be true." Speech, somebody shouted. Let the young genius speak." Everybody was staring at me. I wanted to run away to Antarctica and go live with the penguins. "Bonjour," I said. Then I went over and whispered into Professor Armpit's ear. "I don't know what to say." "Don't worry," he whispered back. "I'll do the talking." Then he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, Arto only speaks French, but I think I can translate his artistic vision into English. Arto, he has created this amazing sculpture. We don't know what it is yet. It could be anything. He calls it future art because it is the future of art. We may not have a perfect future. It depends on what artist creates with the paint in the tube." "Is that what you have in mind, Arto?" "Ooh, oui," I said. He's the next Andy Warhol," said Professor Armpit. "Blah, blah, 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 up and coming, blah, 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 the next big thing, blah, 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 blah." "I think future art is a simple marvelous," lady said. "I love it," shouted somebody else. "It would look perfect in my living room." "How much will it sell it for, Arto?" I said. "A doll?" I didn't have the chance to finish my sentence because Professor Armpit clapped his hand over my mouth. "We can discuss the price later," he said. "For now, let's have a toast." "Toast? I don't know. I don't even like toast. I wanted more pretzels." "To Arto," somebody shouted, raising a glass in the air. Everybody raised the glass in the air. Toronto, everybody else shouted. I didn't see any toast anywhere. Professor Armpit leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Go mangle, but don't say anything." I swarmed or smile. I swarm of A swarm of the smiling art nerds surrounded me. "So you're the young man everyone's talking about," a lady said. "Oui," I replied. "Bonjour." "Young man," said an old lady, "I think you are brilliant. How did you come up with this revolutionary idea?" I replied, "Oui." "What will be your next creation?" somebody asked. "Oui," I replied. "Bonjour." This place was boring. I wanted more snacks. I walked around until I found my parents chit-chatting with some art nerds. "When did you first realize that your son was a gifted genius?" some lady asked. "About 10 minutes ago," my mother replied. The party went on for 1,100,000 hours. What a snooze fest. I thought I was gonna die, but then I spotted something in the far corner of the room on a table. It was a big bowl of orange stuff in it. Cheese doodle. I love cheese doodle. I went over to the bowl and reached inside to get some. But before I could touch the cheese doodle, some art nerd grabbed my hand. "What are you doing?" she shouted. "I'm getting the cheese doodles." "Those aren't cheese doodles," she hollered at me. "This is the priceless sculpture." "Oh, sheesh. It sure looked like a bowl of cheese doodles to me." "The lady needs to chillax,"